that are playing into that. And July is National Savings Month. And looking at that conversation on the petrol price and the reprieve that brings, how can you put those savings to good use? So Sisandile Qikito, who is the head of retail investments at Nedbank, is here to talk to us about the psychology of saving. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, Sakina. Thank you for having me.
So interesting phrase, the psychology of saving. Why is that?
So I think it's about behavior. It's about a behavior that you kind of need to teach yourself while you're still earning the peanuts and kind of grow with it. Because there are a number of people who are earning above minimum wage who are still not saving. And yes, there's petrol price increases all the time. There's increase in living expenses. We know our electricity is going through the roof. Our GDP has reduced 3.2%. But I think the important thing is to understand that there's a behavior that you need to do. For instance, when you get your salary or you get your income every month, it's important to say, I have done something, so I want to give myself something back, pay myself a bit. It's very important because you don't want to now resent your job and resent the fact that you have to go to work. But as much as you do that, there needs to be the same kind of behavior and the same discipline towards, I need to put something away for a rainy day. So the proverbial rainy day or long term. So you define your goals. Is it short? Is it medium? Is it long term? But you do need to put something away just as much as you pay yourself, because now you're also paying yourself for the future.
Problem is those rainy days seem to come all the time, every day.
Time.
So how do we do that? Because with the best intentions, and being a victim of this, you put some money away and before you know it, some crisis crops up and now you go and you dig into that fund.
So the fridge packs up. The stove packs up. Your kids need something some clothes or whatever it is. But it is also very important to know that there's money that you can't access. So whether it's 100 Rand that you split into two pockets, there's money that you can access in maybe some kind of savings pocket, and there's money that you can't access, where it's difficult for you yourself. You're protecting the money from yourself. And I say this from myself as well. When I put money away in those kind of vehicles, I say, I'm protecting you from me, because I know that if I see those pair of shoes, I am going to buy them. Or if I see that, I mean, it's a sale. It is kind of a rainy day, and you know what I mean? And it's easy to justify those things to ourselves. And we're also living in a generation where we define spending as this living our best life. And it's so easy to even make that the proverbial rainy day. But it's important for us to protect our money and honor our money so that it can honor us back.
But, you know, you say it's a psychology, it's something.
Correct.
I loved what you said about this is something, a philosophy that you need to live by from the time when you have little to nothing, so that by the time you start getting into some real income and disposable income out there, you already have this, you know, set in your mind.
100%.
But if you haven't, if you're Sakina now, and it's quite late in the day, how do I bring myself to that point where I learn to do this?
First of all, it's not quite late in the day for you, Sakina. Not at all. But I tell people all the time that it is never too late to save. It is never too late to start saving, because you yourself also have your proverbial rainy day. You yourself want to go on a holiday, whether it's a short lift to Mpumalanga or it's an international trip. It's something that you aspire to, and that's possibly your medium-term goals. And maybe in 10 years' time, you want to go on a tour of Vienna or somewhere in Europe. But you need to define your goals, Sakina, for yourself, and it's never too late to start doing that. To write down your goals and say, they always say, if it's not written down, it's not real, right? And it's not a plan, it's just a dream. So write it down for yourself and say, this is what I want to do. And one, it's not too late to start even with 100 Rand. You take 100 Rand and you put it away. Tomorrow, it's no longer 100 Rand, it's 200 Rand. Because now you have a little bit more. And maybe a bonus comes in, or you get a little bit more money. Then you're thinking, because you're already in the pattern and the behavior is already inculcated in you. So then it's easier to then move towards the pattern of just keep saving, keep putting something away, because it is also for you. And I mean, our life expectancy now has actually increased. We're going to live till we're 100. I don't know about that.
Well, you see
I don't know how
a
I
lot
feel
more
about
of those
that.
stories. But as you say,
100%.
Sanisha, the previous guest, was talking about this, that one of the other things is that we don't save enough for retirement.
Correct.
We get there and we find that we can't make ends meet. We can't keep up the sort of lifestyles that we've been accustomed to. So what do you do? Because even when people take out their pensions, you find that they invested in things like their children's education or helping children who are struggling. And then you find yourself during your pension years struggling.
100%. And I think it's hard. It's the chicken or the egg. Do I put my kid through school or do I save for my retirement? But also, I think our generation and the generations coming after us, or I would say the millennials / the Y generation, it's important for us to also start thinking, yes, I'm going to retire, and I'm going to retire at 65, and I'm going to have a good 20 years after I retire. What is it that I'm going to do with that? Is it a matter of starting a small business on the side to help me save? But it's important for me to say, instead of spending 1,000 Rand on dinner tonight, I'm going to spend 500 Rand. I'm going to eat in and save that 800 Rand, because 800 Rand value today is not going to be 800 Rand's value in 10 years' time. However, if I put this in a long-term investment, it is actually going to give me something back.
Speaking of those investments, like you have things like that 32-day call account, and people complain that they don't see enough yield in terms of, what they can make in terms of interest that accrues on those accounts. So they don't necessarily see it as something valuable or worthwhile investing in.
So for me, I think it's important to understand what it is, what vehicle you're going to be using for what type of investment, what yield you want, or what return you want back. If you're going to put your money in a 32-day, for instance, it's a bank guaranteed deposit, you'll never get out less. Right? You're always going to get out more, but it's not going to be substantially more as you, for instance, putting it away for 10 years in a unit trust, because it's got time to grow there. In a 32-day, it means you can access it in 32 days. So your interest is obviously going to be in line with that. However, back to my point of protecting your money from yourself, you know that, you know what, if I put this money in a 32-day, I can't just go in there when there's a sale. I can't just go in there when sometimes you can think about other ways to make things work when the fridge packs up instead of tapping into your savings. So you kind of protect it from yourself. However, if you know that you're wanting to invest longer term and you want higher yields, you know you're going to put your money in a unit trust. You're going to put your money away for 5, 10 years. It's going to grow, but there's no guarantee there. There's no guarantee that if you want it in the next 2 years, you're still going to get the 1,000 Rand that you put in. You might get less. However, if you let it sit there for 10 years, you're surely going to get a whole lot more. So it's important to just define those savings goals, like I said in the beginning.
And speaking of investment portfolios, as you were with Nedbank.
Yes.
What are you noticing in this space, given our very depressed economic situation at the moment? Are people cancelling? Are people, taking on a more diverse portfolios? What's happening at the moment?
So what we're finding in our, I'd say, bank deposits is that we have a market that the older generation are kind of very disciplined when it comes to saving. They're putting their money in there, they're leaving it in fixed deposits because they know that, I'm retiring or I'm retired and I want to be able to live in a certain way. What we find, however, in our middle market, where you'd find individuals earning up to about 350,000, those are more the spenders. And people are, and you kind of get it. The psychology behind, you've got kids, there's so many things happening, but we're also trying to go back to my point around living your best life. You're out there, you're on Instagram, you're trying to put the bottles of champagne, you know what I'm saying? You're trying to be out there, and we're finding that market is kind of shrinking in terms of savings. However, you also see our entry-level banking, which is what you would call LSM about 1 to 4, and their savings patterns are so ingrained in their behavior. You see them in stokvels, for instance. They're out there saving, and they make sure that that money is in every single month. No one has to remind them. They take their money to that stockful every single month. So it's how do we make it easier and digitize it for them? But also, how do we get back to our middle, our stressed out middle, really, and get them to start saving again?
And let's
That's
talk
our
about
challenge.
that stressed out middle for just a second, because, you know, everything is about that middle band.
Yeah.
The poor, government generally takes care of most of it, be it education, be it housing,
100%.
whatever. But if you're middle class, you have to pay a bond. You have to pay for your security. You're going to send your child to a school that chances are is not a zero-fee school. So
Yeah.
all of these things you have to pay for. And it is the middle class that, it seems, is bearing the brunt of this economic meltdown.
You're 100% right. And that's why I call it the stressed out middle, because it feels like you're taking care of everybody else. And also, we're also the kind of the middle, or the generation that we call it the black tax middle, because you've also got a family at home that, and I use that term loosely because it's every kind of race that is taking care of somebody else. You know, you're making sure people are going through school. But just like I said earlier, Sakina, it's important to, as much as you pay yourself, make sure that you are paying for your future as well, no matter how little it is. And no matter how much it is, just make sure that it's frequent, make sure that it's in something that is worth it. I would say investigate your savings vehicles, investigate what it is that you're going to get out of it. Investigate things like fees, for instance. You know, bank deposits, for instance, don't carry fees. And in other kind of investments, you're going to be paying for fees. So understand what fees you're going to be paying. So if you're 100 Rand, how much is actually going to your investment versus the person who's investing for you? And is it something that you can do for yourself? So we're also the middle that fortunately has access to the internet, and we have access to information. So it's also on us to go and say, let me investigate what it is that's going to yield better results for me, and where can I take my money where I'm not going to be paying fees and I can kind of do this myself, and let me start off small and see how I can build this behavior. But it goes back to your psychology. If it's not in you and you are not trying to get it embedded in you, it's like going to the gym, for instance. A couple of years ago, I was highly overweight. I lost 25 kilos, but only because I started eating well and I started going to the gym every single day. Cold, warm, doesn't matter. You make the decision to start those steps and going in that direction, and you continue down that direction even when it's rough.
So it's the psychology of things. I tell you what, listening to you, I've just committed. I am going to, along with the entire crew, they just don't know it yet, but starting today, we are all going to open a savings account, and we're going to start saving. How much is a good amount? 100 Rand, 200 Rand, what?
100 Rand, I'd say everyone can at least commit to 100 Rand.
100 Rand.
And if you can do more, please do more. And you can do things digitally now. It doesn't even need to be laborious. It doesn't need to be you going out to stand in front of a branch or stand in the line. You can open up an app and start investing.
And I think it's, as you say, it's the psychology of things. So we're going to start with that 100 Rand. And as Sisandile was saying, you then can build up as you go along. So today, I'm going to open a savings account with that 100 Rand and take it from there, and hopefully it will increase, because let's change the psychology and let's start saving without making excuses. Thank you so much to Sisandile Tekito, who is the head of retail investments at Nedbank, talking to us about the psychology of saving. July, Savings Month. Let's try and make a difference. Time now for your news at 8. The economic freedom fighters